Lebanon perspective. Lebanon, a historic vote in a troubled time. A fury of missile fire blew the so-called shadow war between Israel and Iran out into the open this week. Israel claimed to have destroyed nearly all of Iran's military infrastructure in Syria. The bombardment was in apparent retaliation for rocket attacks on Israeli soldiers in the Golan Heights. The explosive hostility, described by some as the most serious direct confrontation ever between Israel and Iran. The rising tension is worrying, enough so that Britain, France, Germany, and Russia all responded, urging restraint. And of course, this comes just a matter of days after Donald Trump's announcement that the U.S. is pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. In the midst of this complicated and worsening conflict, Lebanon recently held elections, the first national elections in 9 years. Hezbollah claimed victory. Considered a terrorist organization by Canada and others, Hezbollah and its allied political parties won more than half the seats in Lebanon's parliament. And in so doing, Hezbollah and its backer, Iran, appear to have consolidated their influence as a political and military force. Lebanon's Western-backed Prime Minister Saad Hariri paid the price, losing seats, if not his job. Under Lebanon's complicated political system, the job of Prime Minister must go to a Sunni Muslim. The Speaker of the Parliament is Shia, and the President is a Maronite Christian. On the program this week, we're going to take a closer look at Lebanon's election and its implications in the region. We'll talk to a Canadian who was there to observe the vote, and we'll also get a perspective on the other complicating factor in this story, that of Syrian refugees. But we begin in Beirut with freelance journalist Abby Sewell. Abby, given that this is the first election in 9 years in Lebanon, what does the result suggest about the political mood in the country now?
Well, I think one of the most striking things, given that it was the first election in 9 years, is the low turnout. Actually, we saw a lower turnout in this election than we did in the 2009 election. It was less than 50%. So to me, that suggests that a large portion of the population is somewhat apathetic about the political situation in general. A certain sector of the population had been hoping that this election would usher in some new faces, some new blood into the political system. What happened in general was that the election seems to have strengthened the existing political parties, and particularly Hezbollah and its allies.
So when you talk about the low voter turnout, do you think from the people that you talked to during the campaign that apathy was because they didn't believe that politics was necessarily going to change much for them? Or I know there's a sort of a system of dividing up the seats within the parliament anyway, that perhaps the system wasn't going to work for them. What do you think drove that apathy?
The country certainly has moved forward in the almost 30 years since the Civil War ended, but not to the extent that a lot of people would have wanted to see happen. You still have daily electricity cuts throughout the country. You still have a lot of infrastructure problems. To a large extent, the people who are running in this election were the same faces, or the children of the same faces that people have been seeing for the last several decades. What I was hearing from people in general was that they didn't really think a lot was going to change as a result.
I know that you wrote about young people in this campaign, and that there was some hope, I think, that the hundreds of thousands who were eligible to vote for the first time might have some kind of impact. Did that happen at all? What did they talk to you about?
Certainly in Beirut, at least, there were a lot of young people who were hopeful that some of these new candidates, there was a coalition of so-called civil society candidates called Kilna Watani that was running candidates throughout the country. And a lot of, I would say, the educated younger class, especially in Beirut, was hoping that some of these people would end up getting in. But in the end, only one of the candidates from this bloc actually got in, and this candidate, Paula Yacobian, is a former TV personality from Future TV, which is the TV station owned by the Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri. So it's kind of questionable whether you could call her an outsider candidate, although she is new to politics, it's true.
You know, Lebanon is a country squeezed in so many ways, both just sort of geographically and geopolitically as well. Talk to me a little bit about the situation with Syrian refugees and how much of an issue that was in the campaign.
In terms of the Syrian refugees, I would say there's actually a lot of unity between the different political blocs in that pretty much all political parties have been calling for them to go back to Syria. A lot of the Lebanese population sees the refugees as taking jobs or taking opportunities, pulling resources away from the local population. So the political parties have been pretty much unified in saying that they want the refugees to go home.
Is there any expectation that this election has actually changed anything in Lebanon?
In terms of day-to-day life, I would say not too much. Where it may change things is in the realm of international relations, in that it has somewhat strengthened Hezbollah and somewhat weakened Hariri. So we could see kind of a rapprochement with the Syrian regime to come. We may also see further strengthening of ties with Iran. And right now, that's kind of a wild card given what's happening with the nuclear deal with the US and Iran, with the fighting that's happening between Iran and Israel and Syria. So there's a potential for the political situation to become more volatile, but I think it remains to be seen exactly how that's going to play out.
Abby, thank you very much for your insight on this.
Thank you.